I thought I was about to become a father. After raising my girlfriend's little boy for 2 years, I was finally standing in a courthouse, ready to sign the adoption papers. He already called me Dad. I loved him like he was my own. Then the courtroom doors slammed open. A woman I'd never seen before walked inside, pointed at the little boy beside me and screamed, "Don't sign those papers. That's my son." I thought she was crazy. My girlfriend turned completely pale. The judge immediately stopped the hearing. And within the next 10 minutes I learned that the child I'd been raising for 2 years might not belong to my girlfriend at all. What shocked me even more was this. My girlfriend wasn't trying to steal someone else's child. She genuinely believed he was her son, and the truth behind that mistake had been buried for almost 5 years. I was 29 years old when I met the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. 3 months after we started dating, she sat across from me at a quiet diner, unable to meet my eyes. She looked terrified. Finally, she whispered, "There's something I haven't told you." I honestly thought she was about to tell me she was married, or that she was moving across the country. Instead, she said 4 words that completely caught me off guard. "I have a son." For a moment, I didn't say anything. Not because I was angry, because I was surprised. Everything about our relationship had felt honest. We'd spent almost every weekend together. We talked for hours about our childhoods, our careers, our dreams, and even the kinds of houses we'd like to own one day. Never once had she mentioned a child. She wiped away a tear before it could fall. "I understand if you want to leave." I looked at her for a long time. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "How old is he?" She looked up. "He just turned 4. That conversation changed my life. What I didn't know then was that 2 years later, I would stand in a courthouse ready to become that little boy's father. Only to have a complete stranger walk in and tell me he wasn't my girlfriend's son. And somehow, that wasn't even the biggest secret waiting for me. My name is Ethan. I'm 31 now, and this happened last year. I work as a civil engineer in Denver, Colorado. My life was predictable: wake up, go to work, come home, watch basketball, sleep. Nothing exciting ever happened to me until I met Lily. We met in the most ordinary way possible, at a grocery store. She reached for the last carton of oat milk at the exact same time I did. We both apologized. Then we both laughed. She insisted I take it. I told her she clearly needed it more than I did because her shopping cart actually contained cereal. She rolled her eyes and said, "You're surprisingly dramatic for someone buying frozen pizza." I looked down at my cart. She wasn't wrong. That was the beginning. Dating Lily felt effortless. She was funny without trying. She remembered little details about people. She always asked cashiers how their day was going. She called her grandmother every Sunday. There was a kindness about her that didn't feel forced, looking back. Maybe that's why I never questioned the things she didn't tell me. She never invited me to her apartment. She always came to mine. Whenever I suggested meeting her friends, she had an excuse. "They're busy. They're out of town. Another time." At first, I assumed she'd had bad relationships before. Some people move slowly. I respected that. Then came the diner, the confession. "I have a son." She expected me to stand up and leave. Instead, I smiled. "You should have told me sooner." "I know. Were you afraid?" She nodded. "Every man I've dated disappeared after hearing those words." I reached across the table and held her hand. "I'm not every man," she cried, not loudly, just quietly, like she'd been carrying that fear for a very long time. A week later, I met Noah. He was 4 years old, small for his age, curly brown hair, big green eyes. He hid behind Lily's leg when I introduced myself. I crouched down to his level. "Hi, Noah." Nothing, he just stared at me. Then he noticed the dinosaur keychain hanging from my backpack. His eyes lit up. "Is that a T-Rex?" "It is," he smiled. "You can hold it if you want." That was all it took. Kids have a way of deciding whether they trust someone within minutes. By the end of the afternoon, we were building dinosaur forts out of couch cushions. The next year passed faster than I expected. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I never asked Noah to call me Dad. I never expected him to. I simply showed up. Soccer practice, school plays, bedtime stories, Saturday pancakes. The ordinary moments became the most important ones. One evening, after I tucked him into bed, he looked at me and asked, "Are you coming back tomorrow?" I smiled. "Of course," he nodded. "Good." Then he closed his eyes. As I quietly left the room, Lily was standing in the hallway. She was crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For letting someone this close again." I hugged her. "We're going to be okay." I believed those words. I truly did. About 6 months later, Noah got sick. Nothing serious, just a high fever. Lily was working a night shift at the hospital where she worked as a pediatric nurse, so I stayed with him. Around 2 in the morning, while I was changing the cold towel on his forehead, he reached out and grabbed my hand. Still half asleep, he mumbled, "Love you, Dad." He'd never called me that before. I froze. He didn't even realize he'd said it. I sat beside his bed for almost an hour, not because he needed me, because I couldn't stop smiling. The next morning, I told Lily. She cried harder than I had ever seen. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. I thought she meant my love, looking back. I think she meant something completely different. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed. She said yes before I even finished asking. Noah tackled both of us in the living room. It felt like the beginning of the life I'd always wanted. A month later, my lawyer asked a simple question. "Have you considered adopting Noah?" The idea hadn't crossed my mind. That night I asked Lily how she felt. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she smiled. "I've been hoping you'd ask." The paperwork took months, background checks, interviews, home visits, everything went smoothly, until adoption day. The courthouse was quiet. Noah wore a tiny blue suit. He looked so proud, the judge smiled at him. "You ready?" He nodded. "Can Ethan be my dad now?" Everyone laughed, even the judge. I picked up the pen, one signature. That was all that remained. Then the courtroom doors burst open. A woman I'd never seen before ran inside. She looked exhausted, like she'd driven through the night. She stared directly at Noah, then at Lily. Finally, she looked at me. Tears streamed down her face as she said the sentence that turned every head in the courtroom. "Please, don't sign those papers." The room fell completely silent. She pointed at the little boy standing beside me. Her voice shook. "That's my son." Nobody moved. The courtroom had gone completely silent. The judge slowly lowered the adoption papers onto the desk and looked toward the woman standing at the entrance. She looked exhausted. Her hair was a mess. Her clothes were wrinkled, like she'd been wearing them for more than a day. She was breathing so hard it seemed like she'd run the last mile just to get there. Her eyes never left Noah. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Please, don't let him leave with them." I looked down at Noah. He was holding my hand so tightly that my fingers hurt. He had no idea what was happening. Lily stood frozen beside me. She looked like all the color had drained from her face. The judge finally spoke. "Ma'am, identify yourself." The woman swallowed. "My name is Rachel Carter." She reached into her purse with shaking hands and handed several documents to the court clerk. I believe that little boy is my biological son." The room exploded with whispers. I turned toward Lily. "What is she talking about?" She looked at Rachel, then at me. I don't know." It was the first time since I'd met her that she looked genuinely confused. Not nervous, not guilty, confused. The judge asked everyone to remain calm. "No one is signing anything today." That sentence alone made my stomach sink. Rachel stepped forward carefully. "I'm not here to cause a scene." She looked directly at Lily. "I've been looking for him for 4 years. Lily immediately shook her head. "No," Rachel nodded slowly. "I know you think he's yours. Think." What did she mean, think? I felt like I had walked into someone else's nightmare. The hearing was postponed immediately. Instead of finalizing the adoption, everyone was moved into a private conference room inside the courthouse. The judge, 2 attorneys, a social worker, Lily, Rachel, me, and Noah coloring dinosaurs in the corner because nobody wanted him hearing the conversation. The silence felt unbearable. Finally, Rachel opened a folder. She slid an old photograph across the table. "This is my son." I picked it up. It showed a newborn baby wrapped in a blue hospital blanket, a tiny bracelet around his wrist. The baby looked exactly like Noah, same eyes, same nose, same tiny birthmark above his left eyebrow. I looked at Lily. She was staring at the picture with tears filling her eyes. "No," she whispered. "No, that's impossible." Rachel reached into the folder again. "This is his birth certificate." Then another document. "And this is the police report I filed after the hospital told me there had been a mistake." The room became very quiet. I frowned. "Mistake?" Rachel nodded. "My son disappeared 2 days after he was born." Everyone stared at her. She continued. "The hospital claimed there had been an administrative error." "What kind of error?" the judge asked. "They said another family had accidentally been discharged with my baby." My heart nearly stopped. Accidentally. Lily suddenly stood up. "No." Everyone looked at her. "No." She shook her head over and over. "I gave birth to Noah." Rachel looked at her sadly. "I believe you think you did." Lily burst into tears. "I was there. I know. I held him. I know. I named him. I know." Rachel wasn't angry. She wasn't screaming. She sounded heartbroken, which somehow made everything even worse. The judge asked both women to sit down. Then he turned toward the social worker. "We're going to need emergency DNA testing." My chest tightened. DNA. There would finally be an answer. Until then, nobody knew who was telling the truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already gathered. Apparently someone had leaked what happened. Microphones were everywhere. Questions came from every direction. Is the adoption canceled? Who is the child's real mother? Is there a kidnapping investigation? The police escorted us through a back exit. Inside the car, nobody spoke. Noah finally broke the silence. Why was that lady crying? Lily couldn't answer. I looked back at him. Sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to solve. He nodded. Then quietly asked, Am I still coming home? That question nearly broke me. I reached back and squeezed his little hand. Always, at least, I hoped so. That night, Lily sat on our living room floor staring at old photo albums. Pictures from Noah's first birthday, first steps, first Halloween, first day of preschool. She looked at every photo as if she were searching for an answer hidden inside them. I remember everything, she whispered. I remember feeding him. I remember rocking him to sleep. I remember every doctor's appointment. She looked at me. I couldn't have imagined all of that. I know, but what if? She couldn't finish the sentence. I already knew what she wanted to ask. What if every memory was real, but built on a lie no one knew existed? 3 days later, detectives arrived at our house. Not to arrest anyone, to ask questions. They wanted hospital records. Old photographs, medical files, anything from the week Noah was born. One detective asked Lily the same question 3 different ways. Did anyone ever leave your hospital room with the baby? No. Did anyone ever switch rooms? No. Did anyone ever tell you there had been a paperwork issue? No. She answered every question immediately. She wasn't hiding anything. If she was lying, she deserved an Oscar because I believed every word. That afternoon, Rachel called me. I almost didn't answer. Finally, I did. I don't want to fight with you, she said softly. I stayed quiet. I know you love him. I do. I can hear it in your voice. There was a long silence, then she asked something I never expected. Can you tell me his favorite bedtime story? I blinked. What? I've imagined reading to him every night for 4 years. My throat tightened. He likes dinosaurs. She laughed through tears. He always kicked whenever he heard music while I was pregnant. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't talking like someone trying to steal a child. She sounded like a mother who had lost one. Before hanging up, she quietly said, I don't hate Lily. That surprised me. You don't? No. Why? Because if what I believe happened, then she's a victim too. A week passed, then another. The waiting was unbearable. Noah sensed something was wrong. One night he climbed into my lap. Did I do something bad? I looked at him in disbelief. No. Then why is Mommy crying every day? I held him as tightly as I could. You didn't do anything wrong. He rested his head on my shoulder. I don't want anybody to take me away. Neither did I. 2 weeks later, both families were called back to the courthouse. The DNA samples had been processed. The report had arrived. The judge entered the room carrying a sealed envelope. Nobody spoke. Rachel held her breath. Lily squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. The judge looked around the room. I have the DNA results. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last. He slowly opened the envelope. His eyes moved across the first page. Then, his expression changed. Not surprise, shock. He looked up at both women. Then quietly said, I've never seen a case like this. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? The judge placed the report on the table. His voice became almost a whisper. The DNA confirms one thing beyond any doubt. Rachel began crying before he even finished. Lily closed her eyes. I couldn't breathe. The judge looked directly at us and delivered the sentence that changed everything. Neither of you is Noah's biological mother. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. I looked from the judge to Rachel, to Lily. I honestly thought I'd misheard him. What do you mean? I finally asked. Neither of them? The judge placed the DNA report on the table. The test confirms that Rachel Carter is not the biological mother. He turned another page. And Lily Parker is not the biological mother either. Rachel stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. That's impossible. Lily looked completely numb. No, she whispered. No. I gave birth to him. The judge nodded slowly. I understand why you're confused. Confused, I felt like the whole room had lost its mind. If Rachel wasn't his mother, and Lily wasn't his mother, then who was? The courtroom was dismissed while investigators reviewed the report. Outside, reporters were already waiting. Nobody answered their questions. We left through a private exit. The drive home felt endless. Lily never said a word. She just stared out the window. When we got home, Noah ran to his room to play with his dinosaurs. He didn't know his entire world had just been turned upside down. I watched him laugh to himself through the bedroom door. Then I looked at Lily. What aren't you telling me? She turned slowly. I've told you everything. No, there has to be something. She looked exhausted. I remember giving birth. I remember holding him. I remember signing the discharge papers. She started crying. If those memories aren't real, then whose memories are they? The next morning my phone rang. It was Detective Harris. We need both of you at the hospital. What hospital? St. Mary's, the one where Noah was born? Yes, he paused. We found something. The hospital looked older than I remembered. It had been renovated several times over the years. Most of the staff from that time had already retired. Detective Harris led us into a conference room. Several boxes sat on the table. Old patient files, medical records, storage folders covered in dust. We reopened the archive. He opened one of the boxes. Someone tried very hard to hide this. He pulled out a thick folder. Across the front, written in faded black marker, were 3 words. Maternity Incident Report. My stomach tightened. The detective continued. This file was never entered into the official system. Why? He sighed. Because someone removed it. Inside were dozens of handwritten reports, nurse schedules, security logs, medication charts, then a photograph. The detective slid it across the table. This was taken the night Noah was born. I picked it up. It showed the maternity ward hallway, nothing unusual, until I noticed the timestamp. 2:17 a.m. What's important about this? The detective zoomed in. A nurse was pushing 2 bassinets. Not 1, 2. Both babies were wrapped in identical blue blankets. The tags around their wrists couldn't be seen. Lily frowned. I don't remember that. You wouldn't, Harris replied. You were unconscious. My heart started pounding. The detective opened another folder. This nurse resigned 3 days later. Her name was Angela Morris, no forwarding address. No employment history after that. She had simply disappeared. Why is she important? Detective Harris looked at me. Because she was the last person documented handling both newborns. Rachel leaned forward. So she switched them? We don't know, but she's our strongest lead. Then another surprise arrived. An elderly woman slowly walked into the room. White hair, hospital volunteer badge. She looked nervous. Detective Harris stood. This is Margaret. She worked here 32 years. Margaret looked at Lily. I've wanted to tell someone the truth for years. The room fell silent. She clasped her hands together. The night those babies were born. There was another woman. I frowned. Another woman, she nodded. 3 babies were born within 20 minutes. 3. Rachel looked confused. I only remember 2. Margaret shook her head. Because the 3rd mother died during surgery. Nobody spoke. There was no family, no husband, no emergency contact. Just a newborn little boy. My heart skipped. The detective slowly nodded. We believe that baby was Noah. The room became completely silent. Lily covered her mouth. Rachel started crying. I felt my entire body go cold. So, I whispered. Noah belongs to neither of them. The detective nodded. That's what the evidence suggests. But why would anyone switch babies? Margaret closed her eyes. I think I know. She looked ashamed. The hospital was already under investigation. There had been several malpractice lawsuits. If word got out that a newborn had no legal guardian, the state would have opened another investigation. So they covered it up, she nodded. I think someone believed giving the baby to another mother was easier than explaining what really happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Someone had made a decision. That changed 3 families forever. Detective Harris wasn't finished. We also found security footage. It was damaged, but 1 frame survived. He placed another photograph on the table. It showed Nurse Angela leaving through the employee entrance. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man wearing a dark business suit. His face wasn't clear, but one thing was, he wasn't hospital staff. Who's that? The detective sighed. We don't know, but we're trying to identify him. That evening we went home completely exhausted. Lily sat on Noah's bed while he slept. She gently brushed the hair away from his forehead. I don't care what a DNA test says. She looked at me through tears. I raised him. I loved him. I'll always be his mom. I sat beside her. So will you, for the first time in weeks. She smiled, just a little. The next morning, Detective Harris called again. His voice sounded different. We identified the man in the photograph. Who is he? There was a long pause. You need to come in. An hour later, we arrived at the police station. The detective placed another file on the desk. This man wasn't random. He slid a photograph toward us. Lily gasped. I looked closer. Then my heart stopped. The man standing beside Nurse Angela was Lily's father. I stared at the picture in disbelief. No, Lily whispered. That's impossible. Detective Harris slowly shook his head. It gets worse. He opened one final folder. Inside was an old envelope sealed with hospital wax. Across the front were handwritten words that made my blood run cold. "Do not open unless ordered by the court." Detective Harris looked directly at us. "We finally have permission." He carefully broke the seal. His eyes scanned the first page, then he froze. I had never seen a detective look frightened before. "What is it?" I asked. He slowly looked up. "The baby wasn't switched by accident." The room fell completely silent. He swallowed hard before finishing the sentence. "It was planned." Before any of the mothers even went into labor, nobody in the room spoke. I looked at Detective Harris, hoping I'd misunderstood him. "You said," I swallowed, "the switch was planned?" He nodded slowly. "Yes." Lily stared at the old envelope on the desk. "My father, what did he have to do with any of this?" Detective Harris opened another file. "This statement was written by Nurse Angela Morris the night she resigned." He took a deep breath before reading. "I was instructed by a hospital board member to move one newborn from room 4 to room 7. I was told the child would have a better future and that the paperwork would be corrected before morning. When I realized the records had been destroyed instead, I resigned." The room fell silent. "A hospital board member?" I asked. Harris nodded. "There was only one board member in the maternity wing that night." He turned another page. "Lily's father?" Lily looked like she couldn't breathe. "No," she whispered. "He would never." Then she stopped, almost as if a memory had suddenly returned. "When I was little," she said quietly, "my dad always told me I was lucky to have Noah." She looked confused. "I thought he meant I was lucky to become a mother." Detective Harris slowly shook his head. "I don't think that's what he meant." Over the next week, investigators uncovered the full story. 26 years earlier, Lily's parents had desperately wanted a grandchild to carry on the family name. When Lily became pregnant in her early 20s, they believed their family's future was secure. But tragedy struck. Lily gave birth to a baby who survived only a few hours due to a rare medical complication. The doctors informed her while she was heavily sedated after emergency surgery. She never fully remembered that conversation. Her parents made a decision that changed countless lives. Instead of telling Lily her son had died, they arranged for another newborn to be placed in her room, a little boy whose mother had passed away during childbirth. There were no immediate relatives, no one to question what happened. The paperwork was altered. Hospital records disappeared. A grieving young woman woke up believing the baby beside her was the one she had delivered. She named him Noah. And from that moment on, she loved him with her entire heart. Rachel sat quietly as the investigation continued. Everyone still had one question. "If Noah wasn't my son," she looked down. "Where is my baby?" The room became silent again. Detective Harris answered softly. "We found your son's records." Rachel's hands began shaking. "He was accidentally discharged with another family 2 days later." "What?" "The mistake was discovered. But by then, that family had already left the state." Rachel covered her face and cried. Investigators eventually located her biological son. He was alive, healthy, living in Oregon with the family that had unknowingly raised him for 5 years, just like Lily. Another mother had spent years loving a child she believed was hers. The investigation became national news. Every television station covered the story. People argued online about who Noah's real mother was. Some believed biology mattered most. Others believed the woman who raised him should remain his mother. Through all of it, one person remained blissfully unaware: Noah. The court appointed a child psychologist before telling him anything. No judge wanted to destroy a 6-year-old's world overnight. Months later, the final custody hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. This time, there were no reporters inside, only the people whose lives had been changed forever. The judge looked at everyone before speaking. "This court recognizes 2 truths," he paused. "First, Lily is not Noah's biological mother." She quietly wiped away a tear. "Second, for 6 years she has been his only mother." The judge turned toward Rachel. "And although Rachel has shown extraordinary compassion throughout this process, she is also not Noah's biological mother." Rachel nodded. "I know," the judge smiled gently. "The court's responsibility is not simply biology. It is the best interest of the child." After several minutes, he delivered his decision. Noah would remain with Lily. She would legally adopt him. Not because of deception, but because the investigation proved she had been a victim, not a criminal. The courtroom filled with quiet sobs. Lily buried her face in her hands, for the first time in months. She cried from relief instead of fear. After the hearing, Rachel walked over to Lily. For a moment, nobody knew what would happen. Then Rachel hugged her. "I don't blame you," Lily broke down crying. "I'm so sorry." Rachel smiled through tears. "You loved him. That's all any mother could ever hope for." They stood there holding each other, not as enemies, but as two women who had lost more than anyone should ever lose. Several months later, investigators finally located Noah's biological grandparents. They had spent years believing both their daughter and grandson had died. When they met Noah for the first time, there wasn't anger, only tears. They didn't ask to take him away. Instead, they asked one simple question. "Can we be part of his life?" Lily looked at Noah, then smiled. Family should never be hidden from him again. The grandparents became a regular part of Noah's life. Birthday parties, soccer games, Christmas mornings, not replacing anyone, just adding more people who loved him. As for Lily's father, he was arrested. During questioning, he admitted authorizing the cover-up. He insisted he had been trying to protect his daughter from losing her child, but the judge reminded him of something important. "You didn't protect your daughter. You stole the truth from her." He was convicted for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and multiple fraud-related offenses connected to the falsified records. One evening nearly 2 years after the courthouse incident, Noah and I were building another dinosaur fort in the living room. He looked up at me. "Dad," I smiled. "Yeah, buddy." "Families are confusing," I laughed. "They can be," he thought for a moment, "but they're also pretty cool." I looked toward the kitchen. Lily was smiling at us for the first time in a long time. She looked at peace. Noah climbed into my lap. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "How many moms do I have?" I smiled. "As many as it takes to make sure you're loved." He nodded like that answer made perfect sense. Maybe to a child, it did. Looking back, I used to think family was something decided by blood. Now I know it's more complicated than that. Blood can tell you where you came from. Love decides who stays. Noah didn't choose any of this. Neither did Lily. Neither did Rachel. But in the end, they all chose something that mattered more than winning. They chose what was best for a little boy. And maybe that's what being a real family has always meant.